My secret, just do something that ain't nobody ever done before, but make it sound like something that's always been there forever.
Welcome to This Filipino American Life, a podcast that explores the nuanced experiences of Filipinos in the United States at iba pa. My name is Elaine Delalas, and I am joined by my fellow co-hosts,
Ryan Carpio, Joe Bernardo,
and
Mike.
Producer Mike.
You're really trying to make this a thing.
It is a thing.
It's been a thing.
It's like I don't know why you think it's not.
I just assumed you would have forgotten about it by now.
I'm not going to forget.
I'm sure there was a moment where we sort of did, and then we revived it.
And we brought it back. And even when we didn't have that, we went pew, pew, pew.
Thanks.
You're welcome. This episode, the TFAL of the episode is Joseph Kapusensky.
That's not my last name. I'm like Joe. That's not Joe.
Joe
Kapusensky.
There you go. Hi,
Yes.
Joseph. Joseph K. Joe K.
Joke. You know, I used to introduce people like, "Hey, my name is Joke without the K."
Or the joke.
Wow. But thank you, Joe, for your Patreon patronage.
I'm laughing on like 8 different levels. I'm laughing at your original one, and then at Mike's, and then at myself, and then
So Ryan is
ridiculous.
laughing.
Oh my goodness! A lot of layers in those jokes. Just three.
Just three. So what are we talking about today, Ryan?
Soda.
No.
Oh, I thought we were talking about pop. Pops Fernandez. Pops Fernandez from the Philippines.
Almost close, but no cigar.
Oh. What was her song again? She had a bunch of songs with Pops and Martin Rivera. I don't remember.
Oh,
her.
Points of View. Remember that Points of View song?
How does that go?
Sing it, Joe.
I can't. I don't
Do you
remember.
know it?
I'll play it right now, though.
I don't know it. Oh, it's got a nice...
Oh, this is a newer one. I don't know this. Oh yeah, I like this song.
Okay, anyways.
That is...
Is that what we're talking about?
We're talking about pop culture.
Oh, sorry,
And-
Pops Fernandez.
Not pops. Pop culture and cultural appropriation. It seems such like an easy topic.
That sounds like fun. I don't
sounds
know.
like-
I thought it was about soda.
Is that appropriate?
Yes, it is.
Yes. It made Ryan laugh. That's all that matters.
But pop culture, what is pop culture?
What is pop? How are we defining pop culture when we talk about it?
this is a good.
Like, is it
place to
only
start.
entertainment?
I wonder, is it
art?
Is it art? I feel like it's everything. Entertainment, art.
Does it have to be popular?
I mean,
I
that's
think
in
that's
the
what
word.
the pop part is, right?
Yeah, but if it's not soda, it's popular, right?
Like in Wicked,
Sorry.
popular, because you want to be popular.
It's Banco Popular.
These such random references.
Well, yeah, because pop culture is very random, right?
Yeah.
Like, I consider my wheelhouse of pop culture to be TV, film, musicals. So a lot of like random nerdy obscure shit like Cartoon Network things like Steven Universe and Adventure Time and Regular Show. I like those things. Mike, what is yours?
I mean, when I think of pop culture, I think mostly, I guess, of pop music. Or like, I guess I tend to distinguish between mainstream and kind of less than mainstream. And kind of the things that kind of fall in between. But it's kind of like, I feel like there is a specific kind of tone, a universality, like the way that things are kind of framed around kind of very specific, but consistent tropes, right? And whereas like kind of the things that are outside of that, they tend to be kind of considered as an alternative or whatever.
Or underground.
Yeah. And so like, I don't think I really even distinguished it until like the whole, phenomenon of what people would call underground hip hop was something that was kind of big amongst my peers. And it was like, this is like not mainstream. And that's a good thing, at least for the folks that like listen to it, and like why is there a distinction? And it had to do with, there's the people that like this version of something that we don't like, and there's a version that we like, and that makes it special somehow. And so I tend to think of like pop culture things as like the folks that very generally like that most people like, but that I probably wouldn't like because of my tastes or whatever.
I really consider everything pop culture, even kind of these niche cultures, niche groups. I still consider popular culture. I just think everything in general is popular.
What do you mean by niche groups?
Like even us, like TFAL.
Yeah,
it's a niche.
Oh.
Or like the certain cultural norms or cultural trends within, say, the Filipino community. It's not necessarily like popular in mainstream America, but it's still a cultural phenomenon. And so I could still
like within
consider that-
itself.
Yeah,
Like
within
within
itself, it's still a popular culture.
Yeah.
Like it just, I don't know. I just like food, for example. Food is popular culture.
Yeah. Sports.
Sports.
Yeah.
Is there then unpopular culture?
I don't know. I just think everything is culture. It's hard for me. It's hard to distinguish what is popular, what it's not. Like, is there only a certain amount of people have to listen to it to be popular?
Well, it's like VH1, like pop music, like they had
Video
that show,
pop-up?
Video
Yeah.
Pop-Up. It infused like pop culture references into the videos.
Right.
So like that's what I always
So
thought.
do you think it has to do with time, era, I don't know, or I because like I know it was kind of silly or funny to hear me ask if there's such thing as unpopular culture, but based on what we're talking about, pop culture during a certain era is still pop culture.
Oh yeah,
right?
I totally think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like the early aughts, like that pop culture, like the real world era, that's definitely still pop culture,
Okay.
even though now it's not really a thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So does it grow within time, or is it just whoever references it? So if whoever who references it is probably why you think it's everything, right? Joe?
I don't know. For me, it's just hard for. I just think everything is like culture, a popular culture.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
Even like for you, Mike, when you talk about like underground and do you consider that pop culture as well, or?
I mean, it gets blurry, and I think if I think about it more, the things that we would have called underground or alternative were also popular with millions of people at some level, and so it's like, it kind of becomes like, is it more about kind of thematic differences or about like, being outside of the quote unquote mainstream, and therefore it's not necessarily pop culture. But at the end of the day, I mean, if I think about it, like some of my most favorite bands at the moment, like
Always,
Belle and Sebastian, they're called indie pop, right? Because they kind of take those tropes of pop music, but kind of put a little bit of a spin on it. But it's still kind of like styled after like music that people would understand or hear as pop music, right? And so it's kind of like, there's kind of this blurriness, really. But I think like, it has to do with like, how do I connect with it, and do other people connect with it at the same level? And do I feel like there's this universality to it versus like only I can understand and own it? And so does that distinguish what is pop culture? Because I guess I latch onto the popular piece of it, and seeing the popular as sometimes as a negative. So.
I do think pop culture is everything, and so it is rather difficult to like have a knowledge base of everything. Like we're all gonna have holes in terms of like certain references, right? So like Ryan, you're really good at knowing like poker and gambling, and then in terms of that to pop culture,
or Seinfeld,
Or
and Friends,
Seinfeld.
like the '90s stuff,
but like that's not in my wheelhouse.
or gambling.
Like I know that you all can quote a specific line from the movie Rounders.
or Nacho Libre. Nacho.
What's the line?
I will
like?
splash.
What line?
The pot whenever the fuck I please.
Thank you.
He fucking beat me.
There you go.
Straight up.
Straight up. Pay that man.
Pay that man his money.
Okay, all three of you know the line, and I do
I
not.
guess we're watching
Because-
Rounders later.
Because John Malkovich is like, he just plays John Malkovich in every movie,
Yes.
right? Even when he plays like a Russian freaking underground gambling
Gambler.
lord, he still plays John Malkovich.
Yes, agreed. Agreed. But I love that. See, that to me is like a pop culture reference that like I don't get. Like you were mentioning John Malkovich, and the pop culture reference that I had for John Malkovich is him in the Annie Lennox video walking on broken glass.
Wow, that's such a
And it is such a different reference.
See, I think of that. I think of Rounders when I think of John Malkovich. I also think of Man in the Iron Mask when he played one of the Musketeers, and he still played still played John Malkovich as if he was a Russian gambling lord.
I love that we're doing this because you went there and I immediately thought In the Line of Fire. See? So this is all pop culture with John Malkovich as an example.
So how did your engagement with pop culture as a youth, how was that shaded? Was there elements of your Filipino-ness in that as well? I mean, was it just all like this consumption of like kind of this standard kind of American pop culture, or was there other things to that?
Yeah.
For any of you?
I think I like to absorb pop culture because I just loved watching TV.
Yeah.
But then I would latch on to things that I would see were Filipino. So like an example is Disney Afternoon.
Liza Del Mundo.
Liza Del Mundo. I'd be like, you're Filipino. I'm going to identify with you and you're going to be my ideal best friend in my mind. As you intro Rescue Rangers.
Yeah. And I think it's so ingrained in the way we think. And
Or like
the
Ernie
way we're
Reyes
introduced.
Jr.
Yeah. But I was thinking like when I was a kid, and this is very, very embarrassing.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Tell us.
I wanted to be named Rick. I wanted to change my name to Rick because Rick was a very cool 80s name.
Like Ricky Schroeder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
like
totally
Ricky Schroeder,
silver
or like
spoons.
Just Rick.
Rick.
Yeah. And then so like, I remember I was playing house with my cousin when we were kids. Like make believe and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I said, "Oh, can I be named Rick?" Yeah. Well, yeah. When I was a kid, I grew up. I wanted to be a blonde white male,
Like Ricky Schroeder from
Ricky
Silver
Schroeder.
Spoons.
Or like Zach Morris.
Like Zach Morris.
Zach
yeah.
Morris.
So like, yeah, because those were the cool things. Those are the structures in place that was considered cool, and you wanted to emulate that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's how powerful popular culture
Is.
Right?
Yeah. What about you, Ryan?
I mean, kind of the same. So I borrowed a lot of my pop culture references or used some of the references from, being a Filipino immigrant, trying to figure out what being American is, right? And also borrowing from what I knew from the Philippines. So a lot of that is what I saw on television, of course, and what I heard and listened to. So our pop culture reference is always, of course, is media driven.
Yeah.
So in the States, same thing. I had a certain idea of what high school was supposed to be like.
Did you think it was going to be like Saved by the Bell?
Yeah, and it was clearly
Not
for me.
Whatever. You were Screech.
At an all-boys school? Yes.
But so I understand kind of like its importance, its power, but also kind of like the the negative aspects of it that Mike was talking about earlier, where just because it's popular doesn't mean it's right, or just because it's not popular doesn't mean it doesn't matter. A lot of times we use pop. Pop music sometimes is used negatively, right? Because that's so pop, as opposed to something that's somewhat genuine or deep, right? I think sometimes we use pop as a way to say something is a little bit superficial. But anyway, yeah, those are some of my thoughts. I definitely have leaks in pop culture, but yeah,
we all do.
Yeah. My like holes in popular culture, I seriously just don't know like famous people's names.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You always like, it's that guy from The Thing.
Yeah, like if people say,
Yeah.
"Oh, did you hear about blah blah blah?" I'm like, "Who?
Yeah.
Who's that?"
Yeah.
And then like, I always have to look it up.
I used to be better at it, at like figuring out which actor was what, but now I think I don't care anymore.
Well, you have access to like Google. Right
Yeah,
now. You have a
but,
different
like,
brain.
like this happened twice last week where when I was getting coffee, there was this random white dude in Frankie Lucy, and I was just like, who's this like strung out guy? And then I was talking to the cashier and he just kind of like interjected. And I was like, you look familiar. And then it hit me. I was like, oh, you were the brother in Get Out.
Oh.
So I was like, oh, I recognize you. And then when we watched The Disaster Artist at the ArcLight, like the night we saw it, it was like character actor central. Like every actor I had ever seen in a commercial or random like sitcom who's not a big star, but you just recognize them from seeing them all the time was in the lobby. And I was like, you're that guy from a Chase commercial, or you're that person who was a guest on Law and Order. Like I was just like, but there was a time where I would be able to name them, and now it's just like there's too many things in my brain, like too many song lyrics to karaoke that it's like it's gone.
Well, I think that, and there's just way more. There's way more television. There's way more movies. There's just YouTube stars, right? There's just way more mediums for people to become famous.
It's
so
there's no way to know everything,
catalog everything. Yeah.
But I think the best thing about pop culture is that it's fun and it's a good distraction from the dumpster fire that can be reality sometimes. So, yeah.
But I also think it's also a reflection, or like popular culture can be a reflection of society.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And it can also be a change maker in society. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it's so powerful.
It is.
Oh, another one of my holes. Sorry, I want to talk about this other thing in my hole is I've never watched any of the Lord of the Rings,
Joe,
or any of the Harry Potter,
Joe,
or the Hunger Games,
Joe.
Yeah, any young adult thing that kind of comes out.
Okay,
I have just never seen them.
So there was a time where we watched all the Lord of the Rings movies.
Well, because it's always on like cable.
It's like
so you're kind of just sitting there on Saturday. So they just put it on TNT and just watch the entire trilogy.
All of them. And the Harry Potter ones, they're always on like Freeform, like that cable network. And there was a time where like Mike and I have a rule: if you want to watch a movie, you have to buy the ticket. So I would buy all the Harry Potter tickets. But then my friend worked at Warner Brothers, so she would take us to the friends and family screenings at a certain point.
Oh, cool.
So then Mike didn't see any of the later films.
So it's like, I don't have no idea what happened after like number 5 or whatever.
I know, it was like number 4.
Yeah.
But then like we'll watch
of Harry Potter?
Of Harry Potter, yeah. And then Hunger Games, I think I made you watch those.
I don't
you don't remember, yeah.
But I mean, like for me, it's like, oh, that's like, you know, in my pop culture wheelhouse, you know, that wasn't anything that I was particularly drawn to, you know, and I think like, you know, a lot of times, you know, we have our kind of our popcorn pop culture, you know, the things that you kind of will consume, even if you think it's terrible, or if you think it's like, that's definitely not in my list.
Yeah.
And so, I mean,
What's an example?
I guess, you know, like for some people like Star Wars, for example, which, you know, the new one came out, like, you know, there's a lot of people who like, you know, this is like, you know, the most important like series of like sci-fi films in my life. And some people are kind of like, oh, this is just, you know, another one of those like films that like big budget, big special effects, big whatever, you know, and like, you know, depending on your engagement with that as like a pop culture phenomenon, you either see this as like a touchstone to your personal narrative, or it's just another one of those, you know, exploding movies, right? Yeah. And so I think like, you know, there's the exploding movies that I avoid, the exploding movies that I chase after. Yeah. You know, so.
Or like even like with sports, like it's NFL season right now, and like there's all these games, and like I'll be into it just because I like the drama of a game, but Mike's not going to give a shit about anything about football.
So what is the footballs?
Yeah.
What 3-pointers?
Terrible.
What genre of popular culture do you feel that is your kind of just go-to, the thing that you love the most?
TV and film.
TV and film.
Yeah.
God, I don't even know how to answer that.
Or like, I mean, do you like watch? Do you follow what's going on in television more, or movies, or
probably
music,
television now? I would say movies like 10 years ago, and then you know, but now it's like streaming television. I probably would say.
Oh, wrestling.
Yeah, there you go.
That's mine.
One.
Yeah, right
That's
now.
A good one.
Mine is definitely sports.
Yeah, your sports.
Yeah. Definitely a sports fan.
Mine's I think it's video games these days. I mean, I would say music generally, but mostly like video games and
Murderer's Creed.
Assassin's Creed.
Murderer's Creed. Because what you're doing is murdering everybody in the game.
I feel like because everything's so accessible these days, there's definitely some truth to everything being pop culture, because there's no way you can't call something unpopular anymore, right? Because there's a niche desire. There's a following for it.
Does that mean we're pop culture? Like our podcast is pop culture?
For sure.
Oh, look at that.
We're part of the podcast culture.
We're part of the podcast pop culture.
Yeah. And
High five, guys. Good job. Good on us. High five. Brush your shoulders off. And up next, we're actually going to have a fellow podcaster, Karen Tongson, who's a part of the podcast Pop Rocket.
What?
And she's also a pop culture scholar.
Yeah, she's a professor at USC.
Yes.
Yeah, she also teaches a lot of cool classes, and she's going to talk about it after.
I think she also went to Berkeley. I just want to.
You want to include that
she
there?
did go to Berkeley.
She did.
Yeah.
I just want to put that out there.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
I was in a.
Nice reference. That's your wheelhouse?
I definitely think people from Berkeley are cool.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, a lot of people I know who went to Berkeley, they're really cool people.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Not Ryan, though.
I don't know about Ryan. In general, I've never met like a well, I'm sure they exist, right? But I've never met a douchey Berkeley person.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've met them.
Why you look at me?
UCLA, USC, definitely douchey.
Hey. Oh, I went to grad school there.
Yeah, good thing I went to Irvine.
Good thing I went to Irvine. Zat.
Hey, Santa Barbara, definitely douchey.
Go Gauchos.
I went to Santa Barbara, and there are a lot of douches there. But
Wow, this whole conversation took a wild turn.
This is
Who is the
Joe's Pop
douchiest?
Culture Warehouse where all the douchebags are.
So we'll take a break, and then when we come back, we'll be talking to pop culture scholar Karen Thomson. Hey, Mike.
Yes.
Weren't you in a spoken word art thing in college?
Yeah. Yeah.
What was it called?
It was the 5-Star Arts Collective.
5 stars? 5 stars, like how I can rate our podcast, This Filipino American Life, on iTunes?
Yeah. Sure.
Have you rated our podcast on iTunes yet?
I haven't. Sorry.
What? What's,
I don't even subscribe. Sorry.
what? Oh my gosh, Ryan,
Blasphemy.
have you subscribed?
I have subscribed.
Have you rated us
I
on
have
iTunes?
not rated on
Maybe you
iTunes.
should do
I
that.
will do that.
I have a 5-star Converse.
Can you rate us on iTunes too, Joe?
Yeah, of course.
All right, cool.
Cool. So 5 stars, like how you rate your Lyft and Uber driver, 5 stars.
Sometimes.
So you should always rate them 5 stars.
Please rate us 5 stars because the more reviews we have, the more good reviews we have, we're gonna have more. It'll be easier for people to search us on iTunes.
Correct. And it's not like the only thing will come up is how to learn Tagalog.
Yeah. So far, if you Google or if you go on iTunes and search for Filipino, we are the third podcast that you find. We want to be number 1.
We're number 1. We're number 1.
We do not want to be behind how to learn Tagalog.
Oh no.
Oh, yes. So rate us 5 stars, like Mike's 5-star Arts Collective.
Or else I'll do some spoken word next time.
Oh, no. Please, with these brown hands, do not do spoken word. But give us 5 stars.
Thank you.
And we're back.
Woot woot.
Woohoo! We're here with our guest, Karen Tongson.
Hi, everybody.
Yes.
Yes.
So happy to be here.
So Karen is a Filipino American scholar, also a fellow podcaster on the show Pop Rocket.
Nice.
Yes. I'm very excited to speak with her today because I'm totally a fan of your show.
Thank you so much for listening and participating in the Facebook page.
I totally participate in the Facebook page.
A lot of good conversations there. And I
Yes.
love some of the ones that you started. So.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'd started the one about a Christmas prince. That was mine. It's a really terrible, like Hallmark-esque Christmas movie on Netflix.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
You should totally watch it. It's awful. So we're talking about pop culture appropriation. That's like the cliff notes of it. And so we have some questions. Joe, do you want to get started?
Oh, Mike, I'm starting.
Okay, I'll
You
start.
start.
How does your experience as all of your intersectional identities, so being Filipino American, immigrant, and queer, color your pop culture opinions?
Yeah. I mean,
It's an easy question.
Wow.
That's
a lot to unpack
how
in
does
one
that- yeah.
question.
So we like to start with softball.
Yeah,
questions.
that was totally easy, right?
Exactly. That was so, oh my God, I can do this in 20 seconds. No, well, that's the way to answer a question as layered as that is in through layers as well. So I think, obviously, first and foremost, my relationship to pop culture was completely forged by that, like, post-colonial experience of growing up in the Philippines and being bombarded, by American television, American popular music, and seeing that as a kind of my relationship to the world or the globe, right? So in the very beginning, my relationship to pop culture was very much about, how I would see myself relating to other places, other worlds, particularly the U.S. As time wore on, actually, there's a funny story. When I first moved to the U.S. when I was 5, we moved to Honolulu in Hawaii, and I asked my white stepdad at the time, why didn't my hair turn blonde yet? Because I had this assumption that being in the U.S. would mean some sort of, physical transformation.
That's so funny.
And that I totally inherited that from watching, all of these American TV shows.
Like that's what you get from watching Dallas.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah, from the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And so then, it obviously is a deep source of kind of comfort and connection for me, but popular culture being such a huge part of creating mainstream ideas and ideologies also, became the kind of crucible for my sense of belonging or lack thereof, especially once, I came here. So I think that I've tried to nutshell it a little bit, but I think that's sort of what my experiences of migration, of being someone who grew up in the kind of colonial, cultural imperialist context that the Philippines is, did to, create my relationship to it. And then one more thing I would say is that because I couldn't see myself in various ways, like being a queer person or being a person of color, there were ways in which I insinuated myself into stories and projected myself into popular cultural stories, even if things weren't made for me. And that's something that I'm very interested in, is that transformative act.
So how did you do that then?
I think it was just like different forms of identification, whether or not it's like Ponch from Chips.
Yes.
Because he's brown and butch. He wore outfits that I liked when I was little. I would just be like,
You really like uniforms? Is that what
I mean, hey, that was my easy and quick entree into gay culture. But yeah, so I think that was one thing, projecting oneself onto other people, or also just like, imagining that I could coexist in these other worlds, sometimes representing other kinds of U.S. diversity. So that's how it would work.
So speaking of identity, your name is actually a pop culture reference. Later, the genesis of your name.
Thompson?
Oh, really?
Thompson, isn't it? Aren't you named after Karen Carpenter?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Not the Thomson part. Yes. I was just like, it is? Wow, that's the one thing I hadn't heard yet. Now, yes, I'm actually named after Karen Carpenter, and my middle name is Lee for Vivian Lee.
Oh, my God.
So, yeah. So my mom had very, powerful feelings about, also she was 18 when she had me, so she was a Carpenter's fan and liked movies, and so that was the point of reference for naming me. So there's a lot to live up to, and my family are musicians as well. So I think that we always had a really kind of profound relationship to public culture, popular culture.
That's so funny because the Carpenters, I feel like they play such an important role for some reason into Filipinos.
Oh yeah,
it's almost like, I don't know if you come to America or when you're in the Philippines, but you're issued out the Carpenters LP.
Yeah.
Because one of the records that I remember my parents owning was it was the Gray album, and it was Carpenters. It had Close to You on it.
Yeah.
It was I think it's a compilation.
It's a 2-disc double set.
Yes.
Yes. And, it's funny because I just actually finished writing a short book about Karen Carpenter and about how I was named after her, and also about the Carpenters and Filipinos' relationship to the Carpenters.
It's so deep. Mike's mom, his mom, what's her song? It's Close to You, right?
Well, I think isn't that every Filipino?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, they had the songbook, and they played guitar, I guess, when they were younger. So they would like play these songs
Yeah.
with their friends at our house,
Yeah.
and it'd be Carpenter songs. So the whole like set up, and like it was just like a common thing. That and like the Eagles for whatever reason.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
unrelated, but
Well, that whole period of like kind of soft rock, or the genesis of soft rock, but also the Carpenters are one of the few bands in the world who have hits that were only hits in the Philippines and not anywhere else in the world.
Really?
Yes.
What songs?
Like You. That song, You Are the One That Made.
That's not a hit everywhere?
That is only a hit in the Philippines. And in fact, when I've shared this tidbit with other Carpenters fans here in the U.S., they're like, oh, that's why Lea Salonga spent so much time on that song in her review, her Broadway review. And it's just like, yeah, it's the hit song. It's
insane.
the Philippine only radio hit.
There's a few of those I know that are only hits in the Philippines, but never made it. Like American artists who,
or like Angela Bofill, who was huge in the Philippines in the late 70s and early 80s, but who had like no career anywhere else, but she was a superstar
That's
there.
so crazy because, I love the Carpenters, and like it's Christmas time right now, and like when we put up our tree, like the first album I put was Carpenter's Christmas. Like it's not Christmas unless I hear that, and I know it front to back. Like if I accidentally put shuffle, I'm like, nope, this is wrong. This is the wrong order. I need to go back. I need to start from the beginning and hear the medley and hear Karen beautifully sing like all of the songs.
Yeah, and all the songs, like you said, are medley, so they all blend together. So it's weird if it gets chopped up.
Yeah, exactly.
So you co-host Pop Rocket. It's a podcast about popular culture. Can you explain a little bit about your involvement with Pop Rocket?
Yeah, it kind of happened really organically and almost accidentally that I became a co-host. So it's a show that's on MaximumFun.org, and it's hosted by Guy Branum, who's a comedian and a comedy writer, and also just a really brilliant person. And it's a panel of 4 people, which originally included Margaret Wappler, who's a novelist and journalist, Winter Mitchell, who's a digital strategist, and Oliver Wang.
Hey, Mike, Oliver Wang, your former professor.
Yeah. So Oliver used to be the 4th member of Pop Rocket, and over the course of time, they would need somebody to come in and sub, and Oliver suggested that I come in and sub, and after about a couple years, I guess, of the show, or a year and a half of the show, Oliver decided to branch out and do other things, and they asked me to come and be the 4th. They used to call me the 5th Beatle of Pop Rocket, and then I just sort of sidled in like Ringo.
You like pushed Oliver out.
I was like, late, everybody now. So it's been a really wonderful experience, and the show has a very kind of clear format. We talk about what we're all about that week. We talk about a special topic every week, and then we share our latest jams.
Yeah, I love that. I like the format. It's cool.
Yeah.
And I'm usually like listening, and I'm like, yes, oh my God, this is the best. That is my jam.
It is. It's a pretty good set of jams, and an eclectic set of jams, because we all come from different points of view. So it's been nice, and it's been super instructive, and I really think it's helped me teach, honestly. Just having to think about my speaking in a way that's more concentrated and not, because when I used to listen to myself back on the podcast, you all probably had this sensation. You're like, oh, I do this all the time, or use this word all the time, or I say all the time, which yeah. So it's sort of like made me more mindful of different forms of public speaking and teaching too.
In your other life or maybe part of the life of being a professor, do you find your students listening to the podcast as well, or is it part of the curriculum? Is there an assignment?
I definitely don't assign it. I don't know if they do. I know that I've come across students at USC in other contexts who've said, "Oh, I've listened to Pop Rocket." So I don't know if they are at all curious, they'll find it, and so. But I really don't know what their reaction would be, or if they would admit to me that they listened to it.
Right.
Oh.
So that's another thing.
You should
too.
listen to it, Joe.
The whole
I listen to it once in a while.
Yeah. Because there was an episode where like Winter Mitchell was talking about freestyle, and I just immediately thought, because Joe and I went to a freestyle explosion
Was
concert.
it at the Long Beach?
No,
it
we went years ago at the Gibson Amphitheater when it was still around.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. And we were there when we watched Debbie Deb like completely like fall apart on stage.
She was super drunk.
She was
just, like, too
super drunk, and she was mean
her
and
set was too late in the lineup.
She only had 2 songs. She only has 2 songs. So
Was it like Lookout Weekend and
Yes.
like When I Hear Music?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was surly to the audience. It was like really uncomfortable.
They had to bring like an usher to kind of escort her.
No, it was Johnny O.
Was it Johnny O?
Johnny O came
Okay.
out and like helped her out, and I was like, "This is uncomfortable.
Oof. Yeah.
Can't we just get the Stevie B? That's all we want."
Yeah, there was one time when Sunset Junction used to happen. This was many years ago. Shaka Khan was one of the headliners, and I went to see
I
her.
remember.
But there was just like this epic vamp because like Shaka like wasn't ready to go on stage, and it's just like that opening vamp to Ain't Nobody.
Yeah.
And it just kept going. It felt like a half hour. We're like, where is she? And the backup singers are there just, And anyway, yeah. So this stuff happens.
Mike, were you DJing at that one?
I probably was.
So one of the coolest things, other than kind of you doing pop culture podcasts, is that you teach all these kinds of classes, and you teach a food class.
Oh yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about the food class at
That's
USC?
like our favorite topic.
I kind of want to audit.
Well, I occasionally invite people along for some of the excursions. So one of the great things that we get to do at USC is we can propose these Maymester courses, which are experiential 4-week classes. And therefore, mostly like a lot of, seniors ended up taking the ones that I had because you can use your units anyway to like from the regular year to take a summer class. And so I just wanted to do one about food, and it's called, I think it's like Food, Race, and Gender in the Land of Plenty or something like, and Food Politics. And
that sounds so tasty.
it was, and so part of it, so the first several weeks we spend in Los Angeles, and a lot of what that class does is it establishes the foodways and flows of different immigrant communities in the Los Angeles and Southern California. But we also do stuff like looking specifically at food production. So one year we
cool.
visited some farms in Ventura. We visited an organic farm and a vegetable processing facility, which I was like, I had no idea how much water they had to use or like what this situation was like. And we also started going annually to Catalina Island. Because USC has a Marine Studies Institute there, where we learn about ocean sustainability and food and marine foodways, and we get to kayak. It's a real bonding experience when we all like have to throw the bodysuits on. Everybody's just like, this is very uncomfortable. And then the last part of the class, we go up north to the Bay Area. And then to the Pacific Northwest. So we get to dine at Chez Panisse downstairs.
Oh.
Which is really cool. And they let us walk through the
cool.
kitchens, and we go to the
I'm like,
edible
I don't know what that is.
schoolyard. And then, we do all sorts of stuff. We stayed in an urban farmhouse in Portland. Yeah. So it's been
Cool.
really great.
Do you go
And-
to Lucky Chances?
Oh, that would be totally great. I sort of feel weird about taking them to a casino. I'd just be like, well, is this going to make it onto some crazy like conservative Twitter where it's
I've
like
never-
professor takes students to casino?
And it's a popular class, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many students do you have?
I mean, it's so funny because like the cap is 12 and the target is 12. So you have to get the exact amount of people to join. People have a lot of different summer plans. So it's always like a hustle to recruit enough people every year. And sometimes you have to downscale based on the numbers. But one of the things that we always do though is the Sgv Dumpling Crawl.
Oh my God, that sounds delicious.
We do like 5 different kinds of dumplings over the course of like 5 hours, and
Where do you go?
so
You
many
got to
places.
take the class, Elaine.
I know. Beijing Pie is the first
Oh, Beijing Pie
first
House.
place.
I only know NBC. I feel so limited.
But
I
yeah,
know Fox.
dad joke central here.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah. Well, so next time I do it, I had to take a year off, and I think I'm going to take like 2 years off just to like regather my strength. Because it's also something to be shepherding like, students from the ages of like 19 through 21
Sure.
on like,
Yeah, that's hard.
it's but next time I do it, everybody's welcome to the dumpling crawl and other things.
In Chez Panisse.
Taco crawl.
I love it.
never been to Chez Panisse.
It's cool.
Yeah.
What is it?
It's like a...
Alice Waters' original restaurant.
Is it everything spoiled? Spunnies.
Oh my god! Oh my god, Joe!
You're really hitting him out of the park.
Wow, that hurts.
Mike, can we edit that?
To make it louder.
Well, we mentioned Leia Salonga earlier, and so just to like take it back to Leia,
Just to take it back to
Leia, because she's the queen.
Yeah.
So she was obviously the lead in Miss Saigon, and Miss Saigon is such a prominent place for Filipino American actors and also Asian American actors. But on the same token, it serves to be very problematic for Vietnamese and Vietnamese Americans. So what are your thoughts about Miss Saigon? Again, an easy question.
So this was so easy. So the first cop-out thing to say is that Lucy May San Pablo Burns wrote in Puro Arte, her book, a chapter about the Miss Saigon schools in the Philippines.
There are Miss Saigon schools
that essentially train young actresses or would-be actresses to end up fulfilling these roles in Miss Saigon, right? So it's created a whole other industry, not only or made industry connections possible for Asian Americans, but within the Philippines itself, it's part of like a kind of extended entertainment export service situation. So that's wacky and difficult and problematic, and but also like kind of amazing. My relationship to Miss Saigon was very much forged by my own Broadway aspirations when I was a young person. I think I was probably about like I was a teen for sure when Miss Saigon came out, and I was just like, oh my God, if I could only even, I don't even need to be Kim. I could just be like Gigi the whore, like in the background. Because that's what one of the characters is called, Gigi the whore. It's like, if only I could be Gigi the whore in Miss Saigon. And I hadn't really been, I hadn't achieved the state of kind of racial self-awareness and consciousness to understand that we must distinguish between Asian nationalities and other places. So the mere fact that, the thing that was the big deal, of course, was Jonathan Pryce in Yellowface, playing the engineer, the Eurasian character, right? So I started to hear the faint stirrings of like those controversies when I was like 13 or 12, whenever it came out. And but then and of course I know all the music by heart.
Same.
And of course, so proud of Leia for winning the Tony. But yeah, I actually just taught the musical and the Making of Miss Saigon documentary in my class.
I've seen
on
that
war.
so many times.
Yeah, it's a class on war specifically, and we read it. We did that right after we read Viet Nguyen's book, The Sympathizer. So like also kind of thinking about Vietnameseness and its representation on screen and representation in culture and how that's like evacuated. So I think the main thing is to provide context for this. And my students really didn't know. First of all, a lot of them didn't remember the show or know the show, but also didn't realize that there were so many Filipino Americans who were participants in so many casts. So they actually got super into that knowledge, and like they were, so they took with them something about that like set of exchanges and covering overs and reclaiming.
Nice, because like I actually went to high school with somebody who was on a touring cast of Miss Saigon.
My
Of course
cousin was in Miss Saigon.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm like, what if they're the same person? But who knows? It's like, who knows?
Yeah.
But and so it's kind of like I had the same thing. Like I saw it when I was in high school, when I was at the Amundsen.
Yeah.
I know all the lyrics. I have sung the movie in my mind with my best friend at karaoke. I was like, you're going to be Kim and I'm going to be the other girl, the white girl, because I don't have the range.
Yeah.
So, and we've totally done it. And it's like, I know this is so problematic, but I love this song.
Oh, I Still Believe is the one with the white
I Still
girl.
Believe. Oh, yeah.
And then the movie
in my mind is with Gigi.
Is with Gigi or Mimi or whatever her name is. One of the whores, yes. Quote the whore. Because that's what it says in the book and in the libretto. I'm only quoting that.
It's true, because I had the CD.
And I'm just like, oh, wow, I should aspire to that. That was also kind of messed up.
So what is the context or the connection that drew Leia Salonga in the first place? And then obviously that's what kind of established kind of that connection with the Philippines and like singers and people wanting to be part of that.
Was it just
cultural kind of moment? But
like if you watch that documentary, it's the things that I remember the producer saying was like she can speak and act in like perfect English.
So that was one of the things in those audition videos. So they auditioned all over the world, largely though in like New York, Los Angeles. I feel like they had one in London. They auditioned in Hawaii, and then they went to Manila. And one of the biggest things absolutely was about language proficiency.
Yeah.
And one of the most heartbreaking aspects too of that documentaries, when they're in LA, they actually do audition this Vietnamese woman, and she's very nervous, but she's very accented as well.
Yeah.
And the patronizing tone with which they address her, she's like, well, she's almost too beautiful like a model, so we couldn't possibly, because
Yeah.
it's direct, like the way that they were able to dismiss her in like kind of vaguely sort of sexist and racist ways. So intense.
Because I remember watching that when it was on PBS, because it aired on PBS, and I think I like completely internalized how, it's good that I'm Filipino, because if I ever want to be in Miss Saigon, I can sing that and I can sound like clear American, so that an audience would understand my acting. And I was just like, this is so good for me. I could totally do this, and not realizing like that's problematic to think this way.
Yeah, so the Vietnamese people are just
Totally
too
screwed.
Vietnamese.
Too Vietnamese for a play.
Yeah,
Vietnam.
and not innocent enough. That was the other thing too, is that she's not innocent enough was one of the phrases that they used.
So what else has something like that played out? I mean, it seems like that's like a good kind of example or metaphor of like kind of the overall kind of Filipino American representation in like the larger Asian American kind of.
I know in Flower
media.
Drum Song, when it did a redo, I saw that with Queen Leia.
With Leia was the lead in Flower Drum Song.
And Jose Llanes, I think was his name. I want to say.
I have a funny anecdote about the Miss Saigon revival. It was at the Mark Taper Forum, and I went to see it.
Oh, Flower Drum Song.
Sorry, Flower.
Yes, I was there too.
Flower Drum Song. I went to see it. Then I went to the restaurant there at the Music Center afterwards, and like. My partner and I had ordered champagne, and because it was also our anniversary, and then I get the check, and I was like, why is this so cheap? And I realized I got cast discount, 40%. 40% cast discount. And I'm like, one moment in which racism works to your advantage.
Yes! They just
Thank you, Flower Drum Song cast.
That's amazing.
Yeah, right?
Oh my God. When you're like, this is an issue, but not right now.
I was like, it's because I'm Filipino, right? Like, it's like if I were just
I'm gonna get mad at this later.
Kind of Asian, yeah.
Well, it's so funny because like now that continuing on the musical vein, like Hamilton is such a big, it's a big pop culture reference, and we saw it, and I remember like there was so many levels of why I was crying when I watched the musical. It was because it's like a hip hop music, air quotes hip hop musical, and it was like mostly majority people of color cast.
Yeah,
and so like the levels are like I'm watching hip hop on a Broadway stage.
Yeah,
I'm watching mostly people of color on a Broadway stage, but then at the same token, it's about colonialists at the same time, and somebody who created the financial banking system that is capitalism.
Federalism, yeah, I know. It's interesting. I saw Hamilton in Chicago recently, and I ended up liking it much more than I because I was like, whenever I saw excerpts on TV, it doesn't really capture what's going on with it, right? So. But it's interesting how much it's taken off. But I do think that like really a show like Rent established early on the idea that you could have a cast of many races, and so that I feel that that's been happening more and more. Where the Broadway landscape, the theatrical landscape has shifted considerably from the moment where I knew that I couldn't pursue a career in it, right? So, but that said, people still get upset when there was some Harry Potter like theatrical production in London, and there was an African American woman,
playing Hermione,
and people flipped out about that.
Yeah,
people still flipped out about Rue on Hunger Games, and about why is that character black? I'm like,
because they just wanted to.
I was like, really, you're gonna flip out about that? Yeah. Anyway.
It's like, as much you love, it's kind of like the pop culture is it's something that transcends, like you want to believe it transcends race and sexuality and gender, but then nerds suck and they kill the joy out of something that you as an individual like love.
Like
a lot of pop culture is based on, or kind of there's race and gendered all over it.
Yeah.
So speaking of kind of cultural phenomena and practices that you study, are there any particular Filipino or Filipino American pop cultural practices or cultures that you find interesting? Maybe it doesn't have to be kind of like a scholarly pursuit, but just anything you kind of find interesting in general.
I mean, and I think this is like related to my interest in karaoke, right? Like, because that's something that is a personal interest. I don't even know if interest is appropriate, like, to use for that, because it's like, it's a cultural like birthright.
Agreed.
Or something like that, or it's like you're just so inculcated into that. So one of the things that I'm really kind of interested in is the variety shows that still exist, particularly in the Philippines. I remember them from being a kid, like Student Canteen and all of that, where the real contests are about how well you can exactly replicate or imitate somebody's song rendition. And to me, that's, I mean, I don't know if I'm answering the question properly, but to me, that's like endlessly fascinating, is to see like, what it looks like now versus what it looked like then, when you get singers who sound better than the original, when you
like
you
the Arnel Pineda.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, and part of me is still like really kind of grappling with or working through a lot of these old narratives around like Filipino-ness and mimicry or whatever, but also thinking about like the appearance now in this contemporary moment of Filipino American actors on television playing Filipinos, which is kind of a big deal. Which it's like we played everybody else, and now we finally get to see a Filipino Thanksgiving on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, or you get to see Jason Mendoza on The Good Place. Do you guys know this character, right? Who's like part of a dance crew in Orlando, right? And so like you start to see these things, and you have more. That means that. And more just makes it sound like so many, but like you have a few Filipinos in writers' rooms now who are actually writing from that cultural vantage point instead of the kind of within the idioms that we've gotten used to in order to like participate and to become part of things.
Shout out to Renee Gube.
Shout out to Renee Gube, absolutely, who also plays Father Bro.
Father Bra.
That's right. Father Bra. Father Bro. Father Bra.
That's really Renee in real life.
He's a priest?
No.
He's a bra?
What? He's a bra.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we get more than just the lumpia and pancit that everybody knows as the Filipino reference.
There's like a dinuguan like whole thing where she tries to make that.
Yeah, I was grossed out by that.
It was actually cool, that episode about the Filipino Thanksgiving and Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, because it actually looked like and kind of felt like a Filipino Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Because it's people weren't sitting around the table.
Yeah.
Like all the food was on the table, but people were just sitting on the couches. It just felt more authentic.
It felt accurate, unlike in the debut, where like when you see that movie from the early 2000s, and I remember thinking like, this is incorrect because the food has been out there and no one has touched it for a majority of this debut. So I believe this is wrong.
This is wrong, culturally inaccurate. The one thing too, that drives me a little bit nuts in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is actually the mom's accent.
Oh, Amy Hill? That's Amy Hill. She's not even Filipino.
I know, but I'm just a little bit like,
I get it too, yeah.
We don't like bad accents. We like to really good.
We want it tight.
We want the authentic accent. Whatever that means.
Yeah, absolutely.
So actually, I wanted to switch gears and talk about this whole discourse around cultural appropriation that kind of just gets thrown out there so
Another easy topic.
Yeah.
Is cultural appropriation like an appropriate term to use when when people are accused of appropriating culture? Where do you draw the line between cultural sharing and quote unquote appropriation?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it is a difficult question, but I think for me the easy way to parse it is to think through several steps. First and foremost is like, who is expressing their desire for or trying to channel another culture? What is the power dynamic between that person doing that and the culture that they are sharing with or appropriating, right? And so, for me, it's really key and crucial to think like if people who are doing that already have like a profoundly messed up power dynamic or colonial dynamic or a power like systemic racist dynamic going on with this other culture, that they have to think very much about what it means to want to participate with it and in it. To participate with is different from being it, right? So that's the other layer of it too. It's sort of like, especially this conversation has come up a lot in the food world, and about like, you don't need to be, do you need to be a person from this culture in order to make its food? Obviously not. Obviously, it's the same thing with scholarship. Do you need to be a British person to write about British literature? No, right? But what is your relationship to it? How are you forging it? Is it that, and to whom are you giving credit for it? Right. So it's also like that's the other layer for it is that that of assessing whether or not this is really happening is like, are you benefiting and are you giving anything back to the community that you're benefiting from? And what is the level of sincerity of your engagement with that culture? It's one thing like to, I don't know, there's this really fucked up thing. Am I allowed to curse on this show?
Yes.
Okay.
Fuck shit.
Yeah. Well, that like you heard about the miso horny like restaurant.
Yeah.
Two white guys.
Yeah.
Like I'm just sort of like, okay, well that's and then it's supposed to be like an Asian fusion place or something, right? And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like that is cultural appropriation.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that it gets a little dicier when you have different people who I mean, I like people have talked about this a lot with Rick Bayless and his Mexican food, and like he was an anthropologist when he learned how to make. I feel like that's a little dicey, that situation, and part two though because it's like he's benefiting, he's profiting. How much has he given back to the communities from who learned these skills from, and to the people, to his staff who are largely Latino, Latinx, and so it's just. So I think the phrase definitely gets thrown around a lot, but my wife is Jewish, and recently someone was like, "Oh, we love celebrating Hanukkah," and she's like, "Oh, are you guys Jewish?" And she's like, "Oh no, it's just like cool to the lights and stuff." And so she felt weird about that. She felt a little weird about that.
That's something I have said.
But it's she's like, I feel a little weird about that because people like, and it's cool like to celebrate, other holidays and things like that, but I think it's important also to demonstrate some actual awareness and learning and depth.
I love Hanukkah because before I went to St. Genevieve, I went to Pinecrest Elementary School, which was just a straight private school. And the winter pageant, you did a Hanukkah celebration and a Christmas one. So for 5 years, I celebrated both. And then, so I love Hanukkah because I would always get a dreidel filled with chocolate. I associate Hanukkah with candy.
And being given chocolate. There's so many holidays for the rest of us, like Christmas.
Exactly. And when I went to St. Genevieve, it was in 4th grade, and I actually asked Sister Elvira, my teacher at the time, when do we celebrate Hanukkah? And she looked at me like, yeah, we don't do that here.
We don't do this at the school. Yeah.
We believe in the New Testament. I don't know what you're talking about.
The new book.
Yeah.
So I want to peel back the layers of kind of this conversation. There was a recent story that came out and we shared it on our Facebook page, and it drew a lot of comments. And it's about a white couple from Wichita, Kansas.
Oh, the lumpias.
Who is, I guess she started a lumpia business. And she learned it from her Filipina nanny.
Oh, man.
From Hawaii. And then she sells lumpia, but she also sells chocolate lumpia and
what?
So that is kind of...
is it lumpia if it's chocolate?
Yeah, right? That's a good question. Right. I don't think so, honey.
But then my question is so if she gave back to her nanny...
does it make it okay?
Does it make it okay? Or another thing is, it's not like lumpia is indigenous to the Philippines, right?
It's hard to nail down indigeneity.
Right.
Talking about the Philippines.
Or do Filipinos now who sell lumpia, do we give back to the Chinese traders who we got that from?
Yeah.
But I think that's where the power dynamic comes in, right?
Yeah.
I think that's probably we probably don't. But I mean, the power dynamic there is a little bit different than, to
thinking about cultural flows and this kind of stuff, right? Like, so, I mean, I think about like Paula Deen, right? And like how she had this black woman who was her cook, and she basically stole all these recipes from her and created an empire.
Yeah.
And this woman, like, and also like what has Paula Deen done for racial justice, right? Like, again, I think that it's one thing to just be like, oh, I picked up this technique of like rolling something in rice paper, and then like now I'm just gonna sell it and do all this stuff, or like all the young white hipsters who sell kimchi at farmers markets.
Is that a thing?
It's totally a thing.
Oh
There's always some like boho like white chick with a giant floppy hat, like, who want to buy my kimchi?
Oh no! It's like that story in San Diego of the chick trying to have like a fruit cart.
Oh, the fruiteria.
Yeah.
I was like so insulted.
At Barrio Logan, she's
my God.
she's trying to clean up Barrio Logan.
You could probably have a whole discussion on like Andy Ricker and like Puck Puck and all that stuff.
Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, and the thing is, like, somebody like Andy Ricker, like, the Puck Puck thing, it did not work here because there's so many Thai places.
I could not understand why you would bring.
But he has like 6 restaurants in like Portland, but like he couldn't make one
Portland
work
and in New
here.
York, it's like everybody
But
loves
we have
it there.
Thai Town in Los. I mean, we're lucky. We're
very lucky.
We're the largest Thai. We have the largest Thai community.
Yeah.
But one thing about it is that he did take a moment to learn about this. I mean, not just a moment. He went and he spent time, and he does, for one of his signature dishes, at least gives credit to one of his cooks. Who's like not even Thai, but actually who's Vietnamese, who created the kind of fish sauce wings that he makes.
Oh, so
there's
whiskey fish sauce wings.
Yeah, so that was acknowledged. But and I do think that people should be able to cook foods outside of their cultures, but they have to have, I think, a very sincere and engaged relationship to it, not just be like, oh, I stole this tortilla recipe from these grandmas down like
in Mexico,
and then like turn it into a thing, monetize something, and without also without any engagement with the community at all.
So like we're talking about food, but then what about it in reference to like hip hop or whatnot? Like there's a lot of Filipino Americans in the hip hop scene. I mean, there's like Oliver wrote a book about Filipinos being in DJ scenes, and there's a lot of artists, and there's like the K-pop whole era where they're like embodying Black culture, and then like at the same token there is like a very wide, or like it's not a secret, it's an open like knowledge that like there's a lot of anti-Blackness in the Asian and Asian American community. So like how does that play into cultural appropriation in terms of pop, like in terms of like that?
Well, one has to think about what forms of collaboration were struck between some of these artists, right? And some of these DJs and some of these other communities, right? So I think that that's part of it too. How much deep studying did they do about, like, they were fans of hip hop beforehand, right?
Yeah.
So it was just sort of like, it's not just like, somebody's like, somebody's nanny is like, hey, like here's some rice paper, but so I think that that's one of the things too, is to think about how to make it more about collaboration than expressing some form of inventiveness or reinvention through you as a differently racialized being from this cultural thing that you're invested in. Right?
Yeah.
I think that you have to be able to frame it more as collaboration, and also to actually sincerely collaborate more. And not just like take a technique and then turn it into something that is like that you can monetize.
Yeah, because the K-pop machinery, it just plays on basically like American music tropes, and like that is going to be rooted in Black culture, because like rock and roll and R&B and everything like that. It's just like, but how does that? Yeah, it's true. I have no idea who's producing these records. Like, what if it is like somebody?
Does it have to be kind of monetized to be
appropriation?
Appropriation.
No, I don't think so. I mean, like, the whole Halloween costume thing.
Yeah.
It's not like really the monetization of anything. It's just sort of like, but also I was thinking about this too, like the extent to which actually people of color, when they take on things that are of European origin, are often seen as being flawed in their execution of that thing. Whether it's food or music or whatever, like Arnel Pineda, someone's always going to say they hear his accent.
Yeah.
when he's singing Journey, or if you are an Asian person who specializes in fine French cuisine, like, are you going to be criticized for how, your flawed execution of it, that kind of thing. I think that like, that's where we need to check ourselves, where we have to see, like, well, what are the expectations of when people who are existing on the lower end of the power hierarchy or dynamic are taking over and trying to, like, are mastering the master with the master's tools, right? And the kind of scrutiny that's applied to that. I mean, that's a kind of scrutiny that we should be able to apply to anybody who decides willy-nilly to take up other cultural forms that don't belong to them.
Oh, there's so much to unpack right now.
That's awesome. So your next book is going to be about karaoke, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Can you give us an elevator pitch on it?
The elevator pitch on it is to think about how karaoke tells us about our contemporary relationship to imitation and our fraught relationship to originals and copies. And that involves not just looking at the technology itself and what it does or enables, but also thinking about the different ways in which we see some people and how they sing or how they perform as either a copy or an original, relationship between professionals and amateurs. So kind of like thinking about like larger aesthetic questions, aesthetic issues, and vectored through some of these really specific histories, trans-Pacific histories, and thinking about that too in relationship to sexuality and how we kind of think of, have always talked about sexuality in ways that were around terms of the copy and the original. So
there's always kind of characterizations ascribed on people for mimicking.
Yeah.
And you're trying to say that actually mimicking is
mimicking
more
itself is the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, or there's something more to it, or that there is something that like emerges from these acts of copying, and thinking about different other aesthetic values, like in Japan and in the Philippines, the purported birthplaces of the technologies for karaoke, that point us to thinking about these questions that plague us, especially in a post-digital age, right? So there's a lot like going on there, but there are a lot of. I'm really interested in like how karaoke's become like is not just a real thing, but it's also become a metaphor for so many things.
That's so cool. Because I know Filipinos are always accused of mimicking. And like, they can't create anything quote unquote original.
Yeah. Right.
But even in that mimicry, there's
art there.
There's art there. There's something original there.
Yeah.
There's something more in the Karen Carpenter book. I talk about, there's a chapter called The Karen Carpenters of the Philippines.
Like Claire de Lune?
And I talk about like, but actually, and also like, I'm forgetting her first name now. Siawinko is her last name. She's a blind busker who sings you, and her video became viral, and her voice is uncannily like Karen. I mean, Claire de la Fuente is like, she's but
compared to this busker.
compared to this busker.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, and anyway, but what does that mean? That I mean, so many people have written about this capacity to copy, the Filipino culture's capacity to copy from, from so many different angles, and I sort of want to think about it specifically as it relates to, this global phenomenon that we've come to know of as karaoke.
Yeah. Interesting.
Nice. So what's your go-to karaoke song?
What's your karaoke jam?
Oh, dude, I have such a big book.
It's like
the
5
correct
pages,
answer
right?
to a
It's
true
like-
karaoke person.
Yeah.
Okay, wow, Ryan.
It's like
Name a few then.
context.
Name a few.
So like, okay, so if like safe space, if I'm with Filipinos, like, and I know that I can sing ballads without like people, or like slower tunes, like one really particular like Philippine only style hit is Maybe It's You by Stephen Bishop from the theme song from Tootsie. That's a good one. Do you like that one? Oh, see? Of course I have Carpenter's go-tos. I have Billy Joel go-tos. Like, The Longest Time is actually the one that I find like people have been enjoying a lot lately. Oh. And then, one of the ones that I do like to do some standards like Perhaps, Cheek to Cheek, If I Could Write a Book, or I Could Write a Book rather. I do Journey. and solo Steve Perry, like Oh Sherry and Foolish Heart.
So Coast Classic.
Yes.
Coast Classic.
Coast 103.5 local
Coast classics, but I also do contemporary. I've really enjoyed singing The Weeknd's I Feel It Coming.
It's funny how you frame it because there is like an energy level to karaoke.
Yeah.
Like if you are starting off with ballads, it's not, and you're not in the right group, it's going to be a bad night. So you have to be like high energy songs, but then you can't like lead in with Living on a Prayer. You gotta build.
You gotta
up to
build.
that.
I do Queen's Play the Game too. That's a good one.
Wow.
I mean, so yeah. So, but it's just like sometimes I just like look all through the book. I'm just like whatever strikes me, I'm gonna try it.
Okay.
you know?
There's like different acts, right?
No, totally.
Yeah.
They're different acts.
There's
and
the
arcs.
Living on a Prayer.
Yeah.
There's the because my go-to song that Mike's mom makes me sing to impress our family is Total Eclipse of the Heart. Like she will say, "Elaine, sing the song," and I'm like,
Sing that one.
Yeah.
That's like in the, middle of
showstopper.
the like on the rise of
Yeah.
like, the night. And then there's by the
and
end
if
of the
I
night, it's
haven't
like
warmed up, I like suck and I get mad at myself because the score is so low. Like, oh my god!
I'm so glad like I'm not the only one who's thought about like the different acts. My friend and I wrote a thing about this in high school. Like you can't start
You can't
a
start off
karaoke
strong.
with Living on a Prayer
No.
or
That's a
Journey
middle
Song.
act or
Yeah.
maybe like close to the end.
Yeah, usually start off with the ones you're practicing for the next one, you know, when
Yes.
there's only a few people in the karaoke room.
You know, there are some songs though that are right in the pocket that everybody will love the minute they hear the
Yep.
opening refrains,
Yeah.
but that aren't too big or too small.
Yeah.
You want
And
that.
mine is "What You Won't Do for Love" by Bobby Caldwell.
Oh.
That one
That's
is
a
just because
good
everybody they hear
one.
those opening refrains and everybody of all generations, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
like how we all did that on cue.
Oh
it's
my
so
Yeah.
perfect.
And it pleases a broad range of cultures.
Yes.
As well. Obviously, Filipinos will know, like Lionel Richie's "You Are."
You are the sun.
Yes.
You are the rain.
I mean, there's a reason why our logo includes
The magic bike.
A magic bike.
Yeah.
Any OPM songs that you like to sing?
Oh, Mr. DJ. But Sharon's Mr. DJ is the one
like
that
Ryan.
I'm
Oh, it's
going
Mega star. She's not a superstar. Sharon
Megastar?
Cuneta is a mega
Megastar.
star.
How does that song go,
She's big-
Ryan?
Mr. DJ, can I make a request? No?
Pwede ba yung love song ko?
My sister will be so happy. Oh,
Yeah,
man.
so that's one. And I also Yakap sa Dilim
Oh my
by Apo Hiking Society.
Yeah, that's some good stuff. Apple hiking's awesome.
Yeah, I always like Jose Marie Chan.
What song?
Please be careful.
Yes.
I knew it.
If you love me.
We've just gone off the edge. You bring up the signature song
This
question.
is
now
what we do.
We're just gonna keep singing the rest of the
It
night.
happened.
Yeah.
Wait, what's your go-to, Ryan?
Oh my god, I have so many Gary Vee songs in my head. That's my OPM, and then I do some U2 like ballads.
Oh, yeah.
With or without you?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
with or without you.
Nice.
You know, and then some of the newer ones like this is new to me, but I do some Britney.
So yeah, early aughts new.
Yeah, aughts new. There's a whole '90s aughts songbook
Yes.
too.
Yes.
And then I do Ed Sheeran, unfortunately.
Oh, you do?
Because the thing
It's
is, like,
catchy.
it's catchy, and I'm just like, he's one of those figures, right? Who I'm just like, God, he's so repugnant in so many ways, but he writes the songs that touch my Filipino soul.
Damn it.
Yeah,
It's true. Like that stupid Shape of You song.
I know. Or like thinking out loud. Like, when we were in Manila, like last year, it was just like I was like, who am I gonna have to fight to sing this song at this place?
Is that like the new My Way? I wonder what the new My Way is.
It's My Way.
It's always gonna be my way. Yeah.
It's the My Way remix.
Yeah.
Joe, what's your song?
Week by SWV.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The intro.
Seemed like you didn't know what I was going.
Didn't we have a whole discussion a while back about like ballads, or is that
Yes,
something we
we did.
imagined in my
The
car?
slow
did
jams
talk about it.
Like,
episode.
why do we like? Why are Filipinos drawn to like ballads? And
Oh, we've
slow
had that
songs
discussion
and-
together.
Yeah, we definitely had that in the car.
in the
but-
car.
Specifically soft rock ballads.
Soft rock. But
There's like a
there's
certain sound that like
it's that era.
Yeah.
My speculation is it also has something to do with Armed Forces Radio and the type of music that was being circulated at the time, and like at the height of that moment, and it was a kind of intersection too of like all of those softer genres of the 70s, like Quiet Storm,
Yes.
and like that kind of light R&B. I mean, that's the kind of music that some of my family makes. So it's sort of
it's just it's in the blood. Like there's a cassette tape that in the 80s when, your family's here, but then your grandparents are at home, my parents made cassette tapes of me talking and singing to send to them. But then they would always make a copy for us.
Yeah.
So there is somewhere my dad singing All of My Life.
Oh, yeah.
When he's like, he doesn't sing, my dad, really, but he's encouraging me to sing Time I've Been Passing Time. Watch. And I'm like, why do I know all the words to this song? Like, I just know it all because my dad was like, we're going to sing this for your Lola because she cannot be here to watch you grow up. So she's going to have that one moment of you on a cassette tape.
My song was Ebony and Ivory for some reason.
Oh, yeah. That was.
There's a tape
That
of
was
it
about
somewhere.
the time. Yeah.
But is it only access to certain songs, or is it is there certain attachment to this kind of sentimentality?
The
Well, I think that there's certainly that. I mean, I think that, it's the multiple layers. So one is like the kind of access circulation of certain songs. Two, that they're inoffensive intergenerationally, so people can listen to them in like a larger family context, and nobody's going to be too driven away by, something
much
that's
sex or
too
something.
loud. It's too loud or too much sex or whatever. It's so funny though. It's because like my older, like my grandmother, like the year before she died, was really into Blurred Lines, and she would dance to that song. Anyway,
Because she wasn't hearing the words.
I know, she's just like, you got it. Yeah,
It's because there's a line dance.
But things that are kind of and that they're like nothing's too fast, nothing's too loud, nothing's too offensive lyrically for the most part, and so in these large intergenerational gatherings, you can share that music and you can sing along, right?
Yes, but then you can also sing along to Sex Bomb by Tom Jones for some reason because all those Filipinos like that song.
I know. Yeah, I don't know what that's
I
like.
don't
All those old dudes.
Tom Jones is cool, everyone.
Hey man, I saw him open for Morrissey and he sang Sex Bomb and I lost my shit because I could not believe I was watching Tom
Sex
Jones.
Bomb.
sing
That is
Sex
like that actually does make me think of Manila as Sex Bomb because it's always playing everywhere.
Bomb. Is it really?
Yeah, it's like in like bars and clubs.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Elaine's never been to
I've
the
never been to the
Oh.
Philippines.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's what an ongoing pitch to the Department of Tourism to pay for me to go there. So that I can explore and figure out my roots. Although we've just talked a lot of shit about Duterte all the time.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I doubt that's going to happen.
Yeah, it was pretty wacky when I got there like a few months after the last election, and everybody wanted to ask me what my opinion was. Cab drivers, like people on the street, like, so what do you think?
And you're like, I don't
And
have
I'm
one.
just like, oh,
I don't know what to say,
Yeah.
I don't know who's recording me right now.
Yeah. I was like,
You're like, it's great. I just want to come home. All right. So, do you have anything to plug? We're almost hitting an hour. So, any plugs?
Any plugs? Well, listen to Pop Rocket Podcast. It's MaximumFun.org. You can listen on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. You can also hear a recent special episode that I did with the Smart Mouth podcast on Filipino food.
Nice. That's a great episode.
If you'd like to hear me kind of yammer on about some of my favorite things, eating wise, with a little history in between, listen to that episode of Smart Mouth. And keep an eye out for the Carpenter's book that will hopefully be out in the next calendar year, 2018.
What press?
It's 4-Edge Press. It's a trade press.
Awesome.
And it's called Why Karen Carpenter Matters.
Yes.
Because that's the answer. What?
Because. And find me on Twitter at Inland Emperor.
Thank you.
Because you're from the inland.
Because I grew up in the IE, so we moved there when I was 10. And so it's very much also super formative to my existence.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This
I
has
just
been
want to
great.
say I loved your last book.
Oh, thank you so much.
Relocations.
Yeah, thank you.
It
And
spoke to me.
relocations, yeah.
It spoke to me so much just because everybody always clowns on the Valley as much as clowns on IE.
Yeah.
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 But there's
for
so
those
much
who can't
more.
see, there, Joe and Elaine are pointing at me and Mike.
Oh, yeah, no one talks crap about Oxnard apparently.
But there's just so much in suburbia that needs to get unpacked, and
Yeah.
you started conversation. Or I don't know if you started the conversation, but like,
You
it
spoke
really,
to Joe.
really resonated with me.
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And, I really wanted to, like, start that conversation or to get us to reconsider, like, to think more deeply about the suburbs beyond just thinking they're a soulless white place.
Yeah.
Because they're not.
Yeah.
And I love you on Pop Rocket.
Thanks so much.
You amuse me every Tuesday.
Please keep chiming in on the Facebook page.
Yes. And I love when you greet us. I answer when you say hello, Rocketeers.
Hi, Rocketeers.
Oh my God, I heard it. I'm such a nerd.
Well, it's been so much fun here. Thanks for
Cool, thank you.
Thank you
Again, thanks for
having us.
breaking bread, literally breaking bread with us. And yeah, it's been such a thrill.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much
for being here.
All right. Bye.
Bye. This Filipino American Life is produced by Michael Nailat. Our intro and outro music is by Roger Habon, aka 10.4 Raj. Resident reality checker Girly Colado, legal advisor Rianne Fajardo, and graphic design by Vincent Collyer.